Hey guys, welcome back to Magic TV. My name's Craig. It's 9 o'clock. It's time for another video. And today I'm going to be talking about my specific creative process. And I have a 10-point plan that I've put together. I've been planning this video for quite a while now. I've been planning it for a few weeks. Because one of the questions I get on the channel all the time is, what's your creative process? Because everybody who comes into magic, I think a lot of people that get into magic, it's their desire to be more creative, right? And, I'm not just talking about releasing magic tricks to the community. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about being creative in terms of crafting a show that's unique to you, having something that's different than when you walk out on stage or you walk into a gig or you walk up to a group of people in a cocktail reception. You're doing something that's kind of stamping your own personal brand, your own personal, personality onto the performance. So it can be a creative process in terms of creating tricks to sell, or it can be a creative process in terms of creating tricks to put into your own act. But I think that, like I said, a lot of people that come into magic, they have a desire to be more creative. I think it does attract, the arts generally attract creative people. And I consider myself fairly creative. There's a lot of stuff that I'm good at. There's a lot of stuff I'm not very good at. But one thing that I think I'm quite good at is being creative. And over the course of the last 15, 20 years, I've created a ton of magic tricks, both for my own show and for my own uses. And then also stuff that I've sold and released, and products that I've released, and stuff that I've uploaded onto the Netrix. But also creativity in terms of, running my business. I have a lot of... one thing that I love is marketing. I've got a background in marketing. I've got a background in sales. And a lot of the stuff that I've done to get my business or my company to where it is right now is by implementing marketing strategies that kind of have a little bit of a different feel to anything else that's out there. So I think whether you're a professional, a semi-professional, an amateur, or a hobbyist, or whatever, I think having the ability to be creative is just going to make your magic better. It's going to make your business more successful. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to think about what my creative process actually is. And I'm going to use the example of creating the trick here. So in other words, what do I do, or what process do I go through in order to go from literally nothing to having a trick that I can bring to market? So I think that would be something that would be well worth talking about. And that's what I'm going to do, a 10-point plan on how my creative process actually works when I create magic tricks. Now, the one thing that I do want to say is there's different types of creativity. And I see a lot of people really kind of beating themselves up because they see somebody and it's like, oh, that person's so creative, they've just put this trick out, and oh, that's the most amazing trick ever. I could never think about how to do something like that. And the thing is, you should never beat yourself up. You should never, ever judge yourself on somebody else. You should only judge yourself on yourself. I've been blown away. Like Lloyd Barnes is a perfect example. Now, Lloyd's one of my best friends, but I watch him put his videos up every Tuesday on YouTube, and the creativity behind the gaffes that he makes and the gimmicks that he makes is just unbelievable. I can't do that. I'm not very good at making a gimmick. I can't craft. I can't split a card. I can't do anything like that. So, if I was comparing myself to Lloyd, I would feel like I'm the worst creator on the planet because there's something he can do that I can't. And I think you need to understand that there's different types of creativity. One thing that I've always really liked doing, and one thing that I think I'm quite good at, is taking an existing prop, taking an existing product, and then looking at it and saying, right, okay, this is the prop, this is what it does. If I take that thing that it does and I put it to one side and I put a pin in it, what else can I do with this prop that is something that nobody else has ever done before? And you've seen that before with the Invisible Deck project and the Cheek to Cheek deck project and all the various different projects that I've done over the last few years. It all came from a desire of taking this thing and saying, right, okay, how can I do this in a completely and totally different way to anybody else? And you force yourself not to do. So with the Invisible Deck, for example, right, okay, so everybody does it by spreading and showing there's one card reversed in the deck. So if I take this Invisible Deck and I don't allow myself to do that, or if I have to add to it and make it different, what can I do? And then you kind of go through the process of saying, well, okay, well, what do we have here? What are the components? Well, we have a deck of cards that allows you to show any card reversed in the deck. Okay, what are the other components of this? Okay, well, the cards that you are showing, the backs aren't seen. The only back that's seen is the card that you're actually showing is reversed in the deck. So could I have something written on the back of the cards? Okay, that's one way I could go with this. What's the next way I could go with this? Well, these cards are roughed into pairs. So what means is we have roughed pairs of cards. Well, what would that look like if I took certain cards out of the deck? Or what happens if I take this deck of cards and I combine it with something else? What else I could combine it with? Well, what happens if I combine it with a mem deck? What happens if I combine it with a regular deck of cards and I have 2 decks of cards on the table? How would that look? And then you kind of go, well, okay, well, what else can I do? What plots can I bring into this invisible deck? Could I bring in Triumph? Could I bring Out of This World in? Could I bring Oil and Water? Let's see, how would that look? How would an Oil and Water work with an invisible deck? How would a Triumph work with an invisible deck? And then you kind of say, well, what else makes up this deck of cards? Well, the components of it are, we have roughed cards. We have cards that are roughed on the back. Okay, but what happens if this deck of cards wasn't in pairs? What happens if I separated them all out? Well, now I've got a deck of cards that are just roughed on the back. How would that help me? Well, that would mean that I could take one of those cards and just have one card reversed. Now, why would that be useful? And you kind of go down that process and you say, well, let's have a look at this thing and let's have a look at all the different ways that this thing is used, put those to one side. Now, what else can I do? And sometimes it's ridiculous. Like, right, okay, can I do a coins across with an invisible deck? You know, and it may seem ridiculous at first. But then you kind of look at it and you go, well, what's a coins across at the end of the day? And you kind of go down that route, yeah? And there's no, when you're creating, you're doing it with yourself, at least initially. So there's no stupid ideas. There's no stupid concepts. I've come up with tricks in the past where the initial idea was just stupid, really, really stupid. But it eventually led to something else, which led to something else, which led to something else, which ended up being an actual product. So I like doing that sort of thing. I like taking an existing trick and seeing which ways I can go with it. I also like looking at existing plots and saying, well, how can I add a gimmick or how can I do things differently to make that plot more practical for me? So, for example, chop is a perfect example. If you've got my trick chop, that came out as an extension of wanting to do a chop cup routine with a bill and a borrowed cup. I wanted to borrow a cup, I wanted to borrow a bill, and I wanted to do a chop cup routine with borrowed items. But I still wanted to be able to do it as a chop cup and not just load it underneath. I remember seeing many, many years ago, Patrick Page. And Patrick Page did a chop cup routine with a bill and a cup, but it was just a coffee cup and he was doing cups and balls loads. So chop came as an extension of, can I do a chop cup routine with a styrofoam cup? How would that look? What would that look like? How could I do that? Well, what makes up a chop cup? Well, it's a magnet, right? Could I put a magnet in a styrofoam cup? Well, I suppose I could glue one at the bottom, but then why am I not just using a normal chop cup? Why am I using a styrofoam cup? So what happens if the magnet's detachable? Blah, 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 blah. Or it could be an existing trick that you change to make it better, or at least in your opinion, make it better. So for the perfect example is Holy Moly and Keymaster. So Holy Moly, Jay Sankey's classic magic trick, which is brilliant, is washers. It's a hole jumping from one washer to another. And it was like, right, okay, well, this is great. This is fantastic, but I don't carry washers around with me. So what else can I do it with? Well, what objects have got holes in them? Well, keys have holes in them. Okay, keys have holes in them, but that you know, what else does a key have? Well, a key is made up with a head and a stem. Okay, so what would it look like if I put a hole in the stem of a key? Because you couldn't do that with a washer. Well, what would that allow you to do? Well, that would allow you to have a very clean display of a key, put it into their hand and have a hole appear on the stem. What else could I do? Well, if I did a spellbound, I could move that hole down the stem and it'd be like a moving hole. Oh, that'd be really good. Now, what can I combine that with? So I've got these keys and I've got this routine. What else could I combine it with? Well, you know, Mike Closer's got this thing called the pothole trick, where he's actually got pictures of roads and there's holes in the roads. Okay, well, what happens if I took a key and I did a drawing of a key on the business card and then I moved the hole down the stem? How would that look? And it's kind of going down that route. So there's different levels of creativity. There's different ways that you look at things. And I think the caveat to all of this that I'm going to go through is don't beat yourself up. It can be very, very frustrating when you're creating magic. You can be like constantly, and I mean constantly, banging your head against a brick wall. It can also be very, very creative because we're very, very It's not creative. It can also be very, very frustrating. When you start putting yourself out there and releasing product, you are going to get a certain amount of people online that aren't particularly going to warm to you for one reason or another. I know that almost better than anybody. And if that's the case, perfect. You need to understand that that kind of comes with the territory, and it's something I've struggled with for years. But don't get frustrated. That's the important part. So now we've covered that, I'm going to go through a 10-point plan about my creativity, what I do to be creative. Basically, this is my creative process. I'll have notes. Let's go, and we'll start off with point number 1. So point number 1, I kind of touched on in the previous thing, which is inspiration. You need to find inspiration, and inspiration can hit anywhere. It can hit absolutely anywhere. So always have a notepad on you. Always have something to write things down. I can't tell you the amount of times that I've had an idea and then I've forgotten it later, and I wish I'd wrote it down and I hadn't. Inspiration can hit you at any time. So when you get those ideas, no matter how stupid they are, write them down. Doesn't matter how daft they are. I remember the original, when I had the idea for the quantum deck, it was like, well, what would an any card at any number look like with a double blank deck of cards? And it's kind of like, well, that's ridiculous. That's impossible. Okay, let's write it down. As I said, inspiration can hit you in any way. It might be watching somebody else's trick and going, well, Holy Moly is a perfect example. Well, hang on, that's really great. Holy Moly is fantastic. I love the moving hole plot. I've been using it for years. And washers just makes total sense because there's a hole in a washer. Well, what else would that make sense with? Because frankly, I don't want to do it with washers. I understand why Jay did it that way, but I don't want to do that. So that's one example of how inspiration might hit, seeing somebody else's trick. Or it might be looking back at your own trick. So last year I brought out a trick called Trivia. And Trivia is movie cards. It's movie fact cards. So it's cards with facts on them about various different movies, and they look legit, like they look super mega legit. And it's a book test built into these 10 cards. Well, where did the inspiration hit from that? Well, from my trick Love Cards that I brought out in 2010, which was exactly the same trick, but instead of using movie trivia cards, it used little wallet cards that had poetry on them. Now, back in the day, they were very popular. Now, nobody knows what they are. Nobody's ever heard of a love card anymore. But it was a good method for a trick. And it's like, well, okay, man, how would that look if I did it with something else? What else could I do it with? Well, I could do it with movie cards, and it would actually make it better because instead of lines, now I could have facts, and each fact can be numbered. And people are really into movies, so I can make them iconic movies that everybody knows, and I can build this into it and this into it. Great. So in that case, inspiration hit by looking at some of my old tricks, and that'll happen, right? When you're making notes, and I've got notebooks after notebooks after notebooks, and when you start making notes and you start writing down ideas, you'll have an idea and you'll look at it and you'll have no idea. You'll be working on it, you'll have no idea. And then years later, you'll go back to it and you'll go, oh, that was a great idea. And now you'll have an idea for it. Maybe because you've got more ability, you've learned more magic, you're more experienced, you've got more whatever it may be. You should always go back and look at your old ideas, even if they didn't lead to anything, by going back and looking at those ideas. And it's one reason why you should be organized when it comes to creativity. By going back and looking at those ideas, that's just going to make you more and more it's going to give you more and more things that you can actually think about, right? And the amount of times I've had an idea and I've gone back to it and it wasn't able to be done at that point because maybe technology wasn't where it needed to be or something, and now it is. So always go back and look at your ideas. That's a great way to get inspiration. Inspiration can hit by just watching television or watching films. It can hit by watching a play. It can hit by just being in the park and seeing people walk past, going into a stationery shop and looking up and down the aisles and going, what's that? Well, what could that be? There's a trick that I do with mini pool balls, and I put it up on the Netrix, and it's I think it's called 2-ball trick or something like that. And that came about as a result of seeing these mini pool balls in a toy shop. And I was like, oh, they're great. I'm going to buy that. I don't know what I'm going to do with them. I'm going to buy them. A lot of the time I'll see things in shops and I'll just say, you know what? I'm going to get that. I have no idea what I'm going to use it for, but I'm going to get that, and then I'll have it on my desk and I'll be playing around with it. So step number 1 is look for inspiration. It can occur anywhere. Like I say, if you're struggling for inspiration, take a trick that everybody does, like the invisible deck. If ever I've kind of in a situation where I've got nothing that I'm really working on, I'll take something that's been around, that's as old as the hills, and just for my own enjoyment, I'll see if I can do other stuff with it. That happened about a year ago. I was like sitting around and I had nothing to work on, and I was like, well, I'm going to take this deck, and I took it, and that eventually became a product that's coming out later this year. So you never know where inspiration's going to hit, but be open for it and make sure you write all of those ideas down, no matter how daft they are, no matter how ridiculous they are, no matter how much of a pipe dream you think they are. You don't have to have a method. Inspiration is inspiration. Don't think about method. Don't think about routining. A lot of the time, you don't even need to think about effect. You could just go, that is really cool. I have no idea what I'm going to do with that, but I'm buying it. No idea. I'm currently working on a trick with bubble wrap, because the other day I was wrapping something up with bubble wrap and I did something. I was like, that's really cool. Go and buy some bubble wrap. Now I'm working on a thing with bubble wrap. Will it lead to somewhere? Probably not. You never know. But I'm working on it right now and I'm having a blast, which brings me on to point number 2. Point number 2, when you start working on whatever idea that you're going to be working on, it's really important to be excited. So point number 2 is excited or excitement. You got to be excited. The whole idea of working on this particular trick has got to fill you with excitement. There's times in the past when somebody has contacted me and said, hey, will you help me? Will you help me work on this thing, or will you help me work on that thing? And I've said, yeah. And I can't think of anything for it. I just have no ideas. I have nothing. And the reason is I'm not really excited about the prop. I've said I'll have a look at it, but I'm not really excited about it. The whole idea of it doesn't excite me. The whole idea of the effect doesn't excite me. And, if you're not excited about that thing, you're not going to give it 100%. And if you don't give it 100%, you're never, ever, ever going to be able to put together the ultimate version of whatever it is that you're putting together. So I did pro caps with Lloyd Barnes, and Lloyd had the pro caps, and he came to me and he said, can you come up with some ideas? And I was like, yes, this is something that really excites me because I love dynamic coins, and this is based on dynamic coins. I would love to do that. Same with Flip Barn. When Seth Race asked me to work on Flip Barn with him, I was super excited about it because it's like, I love the idea of what you have here. Magic with chapsticks, using the gimmick that you have, is brilliant. I love it. It would made me excited. I've turned around to people in the past and I've said, no, I'm not going to work on that. And the reason I'm not going to work on it is because it doesn't make me excited. You've only got a certain amount of time in the day. Time management to me is very, very important. And people ask me how I manage my time. One of the ways that I manage my time is by making sure that I'm as productive as I possibly can be. And one of the ways that I'm as productive as I can be is by making sure that I'm working on stuff that excites me. In my company, I don't get involved in the finance side of things. I don't get involved in the bookkeeping side of things. I don't get involved in the admin side of things. That bores me. So because it bores me, I'm not going to do anything with that. I'm just not. I'm only going to work on stuff that excites me. So you need to get excited. When you have an idea and you write it down and you're looking through those ideas and thinking about what you're going to work on first, make sure that the thing that you work on first really excites you. Okay, step 3. So you've got loads of inspiration. You've got books full of ideas. You've got no idea how to put these ideas together, but you've got no idea, but you've got tons of inspirational things in there, right? And then you're looking through them and you've picked out the ones that really give you that warm and fuzzy inside and make you really excited. The next thing is you come up with some crazy ideas and concepts, and remember, there's no stupid ideas. So you've got your idea, right? You've got your idea, whatever it may be. There's a trick I'm working on at the moment, right? And I'll tell you exactly what it is because I'm not there yet. The trick I'm working on is a levitation. And the whole idea is to take a 10p coin, borrow a 10p coin, have it signed, throw a little pocket handkerchief over it, have it float up into the air, so the handkerchief and the coin floats up into the air, off the spectator's hand. So it's on the spectator's hand, it floats up into the air, off the spectator's hand, boom, you snap your fingers, and the napkin flutters down to the hand and the coin's gone. Now, anybody who's been in magic for a while, that does stage magic or illusions especially, will know that that idea was inspired by the Ashra levitation, which is where a girl goes onto a table covered in a cloth and girl gets raised up into the air, floated up in the air, and then the cloth flutters down to the ground. So my inspiration from that was watching the Ashra levitation and going, you know what, that'd be a really good trick to do close up. What would that look like? And it made me excited because I do illusions. I love the idea of doing that with a coin. I think that would look amazing. Got me excited. I'm currently working on it right now. I've got no method really, but I'm writing down crazy ideas and concepts, and they are just mental. So I've got like I've wrote down things that extend out of my sleeve and then automatically come up in the air. I've got pencils that are like hinged. I've got thread. I've got a whole bunch of different ideas. I've got like stooging methods. I'm just writing down every single method that I can possibly think of making this happen. There are no stupid ideas because you never know when you're going to hit on a really good idea. I remember when I was working on the quantum deck and the whole idea was having a blank deck of cards with one card in a particular position. I'm like, well, you know, I wrote down roughing fluid. Now, at the time, roughing spray, I was like, how the hell is roughing spray going to help? That's just going to hide the faces of the cards, right? That's not going to help me get a card into a particular position in a deck. That's stupid. Now, if I'd have just said, right, that's stupid, I'm not going to write it down, that would have been dismissed. Then when I start really working on this stuff, that wouldn't have been there as an idea for me to try. So I wouldn't have gone down the route of what ultimately became the method for the quantum deck. So there are no stupid methods. There are no stupid ideas. Pipe dreams, ridiculous stuff, whatever it is. This point here, point 3, is you've picked something that you want to work on. You're writing a ton of crazy, stupid stuff down that you think might possibly be the germ of an idea towards a method. Okay, and just be as crazy as you possibly can. The more mental, the better. So at this point, you've picked your trick and you're writing down stupid ideas to make it happen, which is where I am with my Ashra coin levitation right now. Point number 4 is going to be the long one. This takes a while, and this is trial and error. So in other words, you've got all your crazy ideas for the trick, right? So you wrote them all down. If I could do this, maybe I could do this, maybe I could do this. Then you start working on those and you'll realize that a lot of them don't work. But even though they don't work, you don't dismiss them. You go, okay, this doesn't work. Think about why it doesn't work. Why does this not work? So, for example, my pencil idea does not work for a variety of different reasons. One of which, you can't hinge a pencil. One of which is, it looks pretty obvious when the handkerchief's going up that they see a pencil. There's a million reasons why it doesn't work, right? But what you don't want to do at that point is go, well, that's completely stupid. You go, well, okay, it doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? Well, it doesn't work because of this. So it doesn't work because it's not hinged. Well, what would a hinge in a pencil look like? Could I hinge a pencil? Well, probably not, but could I get a piece of metal made that would hinge? Yeah, I could probably do that. Does that fix the problem? No. Why? Well, because when it comes up in the air, I'm still going to see the pencil, right? Because the pencil's still going to be there. Okay, how can I fix that? Well, let's assume we've got a piece of metal. Could I make part of it, instead of out of metal, could I make it out of like a clear plastic or something like that? Okay, if I made it out of a clear plastic, would people still be able to see it? Yes, possibly. So how do I fix that? And it's kind of that sort of thing. It's like, well, okay, don't just dismiss it. This is trial and error right now. And then you might say, well, okay, this isn't working, but what if I combine it with this? I was thinking about thread here. Now, thread doesn't work because it will snap when I'm trying to lift up a handkerchief. But what about if I took the thread and I combined it with this and this made it go part of the way? Would that work? Well, no, because it's still going to snap. Well, what if I made the handkerchief smaller? Or what if I took a special coin? And what if I took a coin and I switched it so it's actually a really lightweight coin? Now, would that snap? I don't know. Let's try. How am I going to get a lightweight coin? You don't want to think about worrying about getting a lightweight coin right now. You're just coming up with lots of different trial and error ways of making this happen. Well, I haven't got a lightweight coin, but I've got an omni coin over there. I'll grab an omni coin. Or can I use a smaller coin? Or what? You know, you're going through the trial and error process. Imagine a scientist in a lab wearing a white lab coat and there's explosions going on everywhere. This This is where you get to play. For me, when it comes to creativity, this is the fun part. This is the bit that I really enjoy, more than releasing the magic trick, because when the trick's released, I've done all the bit that I'm really excited about, okay? When the trick's released, I'm like, yeah, I've been working with this for like 2 or 3 years, if not longer. But this bit right now, when I get to be a full-on mad scientist and all crazy stuff is happening, this is the bit that I love. So play here. Have fun with it. Don't look at it as a frustrate. A lot of creators, they get really frustrated at this point because they've got this idea. They know there's a way to make this idea a reality, but they don't know how to get there. That's part of the process. You can't skip the steps. Imagine this is where you start, this is the end point, and there's lots of steps. You can't skip the steps. You just can't. You have to go over each individual step. And you know, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. It's not easy. Not everybody is doing it. And part of the thing is don't get frustrated and enjoy the experience. But this is the trial and error part, okay? This is where you're coming up with the crazy methods that you think might just eventually end up, which then brings us to the next point, point number 5. Okay, so the 5th point is another part of the fun bit, but it's also a little bit frustrating, which is prototyping. So this is now where you need to make a prototype, and I'm talking about a working prototype, because I might have been fiddling around with straws and things before, and straws, and let's say I've got a method for my astral levitation, which I haven't. I'm stuck on point number 3 at the moment, to be honest. But let's say I've got a method for my astral levitation, and I've kind of mocked something up with straws and God knows what. Right now, this is the point where I'm going to actually prototype the trick. And this can be reaching out to an expert or trying to do it myself. Now, somebody like Lloyd Barnes would do it himself because he has the ability to do that. I have the ability to prototype a bunch of stuff. I'm amazing with roughing fluid. Trust me, I'm amazing with roughing fluid. There's a lot of stuff that I'm really good at. I'm not great at making card gaffs. It's why you probably won't see many card gaffs from me, because I can't really do them, right? But this is where you reach out to an expert. So I might reach out to somebody like Lloyd Barnes. I might reach out to Phil Smith. I might reach out to John Morton. I might reach out to Steve O. Watson. If it's a trick that I think is definitely going to work, but I need a prototype and I haven't got the ability to get a prototype, I might need to speak to somebody like Penguin or Murphy's or Alakazam or 1914 and say, look, this is the idea. I know it's going to work. Can you help me put a prototype together? That's happened recently. I'm working on a trick with Alakazam and I hadn't got the ability to make the trick. So I contacted Pete and I said, this is the idea. This is how it's going to work. And he's like, that's brilliant. I'm like, yeah, I just can't make it. And he's just delivered me my prototype for that particular trick, which is amazing. So reach out to people, and this is where networking comes in. Networking, when you go into magic conventions, meet people who you think could help you. So I went to the Rendezvous Magic Convention, and I met somebody who builds props for a lot of magicians. He's based in China, and he's got connections in China, and he builds a lot of the props and a lot of the stuff for various different magicians. And I was like, brilliant, I need your phone number. I need your details, because I'm definitely going to need your help at some point in the future. You need to make your prototypes somehow, because the next stage is going to, very soon, you're going to be trialing this out in the real world. The only way you can do that is when you've got a working prototype. So this could take days, depending on the complexity of the trick that you've created. This could take days, it could take weeks, it could even take months, and times it took years. And this comes back to where it says, don't be frustrated. Oh, and on that point, you can be working on several things at the same time, right? Don't just go, well, this is the only trick I'm working on. It's going to take me 10 years to get to the point where I've got a prototype, so nothing else is going to happen till I get it. You can work on other stuff at the same time. That's why you've had all of those ideas in your book. You can work on multiple things at the same time. I know I do. But anyway, this is the point where you get your working prototype. Point number 6, you've got a working prototype and you think it works. Now you've got more trial and error, because now you've got a working prototype. Now you can actually start making sure that this thing actually works. So now you kind of start fleshing out the trick. And from my point of view, one thing I like to do is I like to have numerous routines with the prop, not just one. I like to try and give people as much value as possible. So one thing I'll do here in the trial and error in this part, now I've got the working prototype, is I'll be going, right, okay, what am I going to do with this? What different routines can I put together with this? What can I do with it? Okay, this is the original use of this trick. This is what I intended it to be used for. Does that work? Because if that doesn't work, you ain't going anywhere else. But if it does work, brilliant. Now what else can I do with this prototype? Now you might get to the point in the prototyping where it doesn't work like you want it to. I've had that so many times. Oh, I thought this was going to work, but it's not worked because of this. I remember Alakazam, Drew Perry and Roman Armstrong and Pete Nardi telling me that when they came up with Hard Stretch, they made the first prototype and they thought it worked, but when they actually started using it, they realized it was too brittle, so they had to make another prototype that was stronger and thicker. Right? So at this prototyping, this trial and error stage, if there's something wrong with the prototype, you need to know about it now. So you need to be using this over and over again. You don't want to release a product and then you have people turning around to you and going, well, you know, it broke after a month. You want to be in a situation where you are 100% confident that this thing that eventually you might be releasing to the Magic community is reliable and it works. So this is where all that trial and error takes place. You're making sure that the thing works. You're coming up with ideas for it. We're coming up with routines for it. Don't be one of those guys that puts a 10-minute tutorial on going, hey, this is the flap. This is what it does. Thanks for buying me the trick. See you again soon. Give people added value. Give people as much value as you possibly can. And one way of doing that, by giving people massive value, is making sure that the gimmick works exactly as you meant it to be, and you've got tons of ideas and tons of routines. That's what you're doing in this stage. Now we're going to go on to the next fun bit. This is my favorite bit, number 7. Point number 7 is where you start doing this thing in the real world. This is where you take it out to the real world and you start performing it to real people in gigs, because that's what you have to do. If you're going to release something to a Magic world and to the Magic community, you have to make sure it works in the real world. I cannot tell you the amount of times that I've seen a trick that someone's released and I can just tell it was never worked in. Somebody had an idea, they built it, they made it work, but you can tell that I've not had any flight time with this trick, right? Don't be that person. Go and take it out in the real world. Every single trick I have ever created has changed when I took it out into the real world for a variety of different reasons. Chop, when I first created Chop, the magnet was too weak. Then the magnet was too strong. Then the magnet was in the wrong end of the wrong end of the pen. There's problems with every single trick that I have ever released. Ever. I've got a trick that I'm working on at the moment that I'm currently in real world trials with. I'm currently doing it out in the real world, and I've realized that there's a problem with it. It's a card trick, and the problem is it's gaffed in a particular way, and the gaff isn't strong enough, and it's causing real issues. So I've taken it back to the drawing board. I've completely reworked that particular gimmick. I've made it stronger. Now it's working, and it's working brilliant. I only knew that because I took it out into the real world. I performed it to real people, and I was realizing there was an issue as I was performing it, but I could also tell that people were realizing there was an issue at all. There was an issue as well. So I had to take it back, make it stronger, and then I've took it out, and now it's working brilliantly. This is where you'll also pick up lines, because a lot of the time the presentation will come when you're doing it to real people. Somebody will say something and you go, oh, that's really good, I'm sticking that in. Or you'll just say a line off the top of your head and you'll be like, oh, that's perfect, I'm going to include that again. Or something might happen and you'll come up with a new method or a new way of using this particular gimmick that's going to enhance it even more. You'll also understand, by going and performing it in the real world, what the limitations of this trick are. What are the angle issues? What are the sleight of hand problems? Like with my coin Ashrar idea, when I get to the point, if I get to the point where I'm doing it in the real world, I'll know, okay, is it okay to be seen from the side? Is it okay for people to be really close up? If it's not okay for people to be really close up, where do I need people to stand? What do I need people to do? All of this stuff is so vitally important. You have to work this in the real world and get it to a point where it works perfectly. This can take months. It's not going to take days. Don't take it out for one day and go sorted. It can take weeks. It can take months. It can even take years. Do not release a substandard trick. Know in your heart of hearts that everything that you've ever put out at least from your point of view, is a real world working trick. And if you're the sort of person like a Lloyd Barnes, for example, or like a Chris James, who doesn't go out and perform professionally, get people that do. Get people that you know that work professionally and get them to try it for you. People that you can trust, that you like, know, and trust, and get them to work it for you. Which brings me on to the next point, which is point number 8. Okay, in this point, the next thing I would suggest is bring in the experts. What do I mean by bring in the experts? Surround yourself by a group of people that you can trust, that can give you opinions on the trick above and beyond what a real world audience would give you. Now, what I mean by that is this can, and a lot of the time, will be magicians, so magic buddies. But 2 things. Number 1, someone you can trust. I've had people in the past that I've shown tricks to, and they've just screwed me over and released it myself. Everybody has one of those stories. Make sure it's people you can trust. People that I can trust are people like Drew Perry, people like John Morton, people like Nemid Phoenix, people like Alex Foden, people like Lloyd Barnes, people like Eric Tate, people like Sean Dunn, Titanus, all of these people, David Jonathan, Nicholas Mavresis, the list goes, Matthew Wright, the list goes on and on. People I know I can trust that are brilliant at what they do. I can show this trick to them and I can say, look, I've got it into a situation where I'm happy with it in the real world. It's getting great reactions. Now you look at it and you tell me what you think, because a magician might look at it and they might suggest something that a layman wouldn't think of that just turns it on its head. I've had that so many times. I'm working on a particular thing at the moment. In all honesty, I'll be honest with you, this is not a thing to release. This is a new act for Ryland, and I ran it through Lloyd. And because creating this act for Ryland that I'm doing at the moment is exactly the same process I'm going through as if I was creating a trick. And Ryland had gone out into the real world and tried it, and it went well. And I said it to Lloyd, and Lloyd said, "Why don't you do this?" Game changer. That one thing that he said made the trick 100 times better. 100 times better. Like literally 100 times better. And I never would have thought of that. And it was only describing the trick to Lloyd that he was able to say, you should do this. Now, from the audience's point of view, it makes a massive difference, but I never would have got that feedback from a member of the audience. They never would have thought that way. This is why you're bringing in the experts at this point. And by the way, when I talk about bringing in the experts, I'm not just talking about magicians. I'm also talking about actors. Surround yourself with creative people, actors, performers, people that you can bring in and you can say, look, this is the trick. What do you think from a performance point of view? What do you think? This is the bit where you hone it and you refine it. And if you are given feedback that you think makes that trick 1,000,000 times better, or even a 10th better, then go and put it back into the real world with that thing changed and see what the reactions are like now. Because you might think that's better, but when you put it out into the real world and you try it, it might not be. It might be getting weaker reactions. That can happen. So this is where you're refining it, right? So that point number 8, you're refining it, which brings us on to point number 9. Point number 9, more real world experience. So once you've got, like I said, I just mentioned this briefly, but once you've actually refined this, once you've actually got to the point that you've brought in experts and they've given you advice on this and they've said, hey, this is the way you should go, this is what you should do, and you've got this advice and you've taken it on board, now you take it back into the real world again and you try it out again and you get it perfect. Don't be one of those guys, and I've seen it many, many times, when they go to release their product and they're putting it out with a magic company and they go to do the live performances and they're shaking like a leaf, they're worried, they're nervous, they can't perform it. You know, that comes from a lack of experience of performing that particular trick. Any trick you put out, you should know inside out, up to front, back to front, left raise, sideways. You should know absolutely everything about that trick every step of the way. And that comes down to real world experience. Now, let's talk about number 10. The 10th and the final point, and then there's a few little bonus points at the end, but the 10th and the final point in my creative process is flight time. Go and perform this. Don't be in a rush to bring this to market. Don't be in a rush. Don't be that guy that just rushes something out. Try it out, trial it out. And if you've got a company that's invested in the prototyping and they're harassing you and they're saying, come on, we need to film this, you go, no, wait. I want to get this absolutely perfect. I want this the best it can be. There is no substitute to flight time at all in any way, shape or form. No substitute to flight time. So you need to go out there and you need to work it in any environment. Okay, so does it work strolling? Yes, brilliant. Does it need a table? No, great. Does it work on banquets to like 10 people? Does it work in a parlor show? Does it work on stage? Will it work as a front of cloth piece in a really big show? Will it work impromptu? What's the reset like? How do I reset it quickly? Is the way of improving that reset? Are there any other ways of doing this? If I brought a stooge in or a helper, would that make it better? What if I did it with this? What if I combined it with that? What if I did this with it? What if I did that with it? People say to me, how do you put a tutorial together that's 3 hours long or 4 hours long? The reason I do that is because I've thought through everything about that particular product. Honestly, when I read out a tutorial for a trick, take it to the bank that tutorial has got every little bit of idea and thought that I've ever had with that particular trick, and I am spent. There's nothing else I can do, and that comes from flight time. So after the flight time, that's it. Then you can go to the company or you can release it or release it yourself. This is not a video about how to release a magic trick. We can do one of those if you want to. The point is, at that point, the trick is now ready for you to release. You should be confident that this is the best it can absolutely be. The only other thing I'd say at that point is make sure it is as good as it can be. You know, honestly, objectively look at it and say, is this going to give back to the magic community? Is this something that's going to elevate your brand or your reputation? It's not going to take a step back from it, but it's actually going to improve it. As long as you believe that in yourself, that's the most important thing. Couple of things I'd like to say, couple of extra points, little things to consider. Number one, there is a floating point, kind of like a bonus 11th point, which is if at any point it fails any of the stuff that you're doing, then go back to point 3. Point 3 was come up with crazy ideas and concepts. So if you're doing trial and error and you can't come up with an ideas, none of those ideas work, then you go back to point number 3. When you've prototyped it, if the prototype just doesn't work, you go back to point number 3. If it doesn't work in the real world at all, you go back to point number 3. If the experts say this is cack, or if the flight time shows it's not very good, you go back to point number 3. If at any point none of this works, you go back to point number 3. The second point is don't be afraid to step away from the project. Don't put all of your time and effort into something. I spoke to a creator a little while ago, and he was getting so frustrated. He'd spent 2 years working on this particular trick, and he was no further along, and he hadn't worked on anything else. If it's getting to a point where you're just banging your head on against a brick wall, don't be afraid to step away, because it's not going to do your mental health any good, right? You want to just make sure that you're constantly working on something that fills you with excitement. And that's the other important point. If you ever stop being excited about this particular thing, quit. Okay, so I talked about point number 2, excitement, and it's important to be excited about that particular thing that you're working on. It is. If you get to the point that you're not excited about it anymore for whatever reason, just bin it, put it to one side, leave it alone, right? I'm not saying get rid of it completely, but step away. Do something else, work on something else. Do the stuff that you really enjoy. Take another idea from your book of ideas and start working on that. Because I've actually got a thing here that, you know, be working on numerous things at the same time. Don't just work on one idea. Have that idea and that idea and that idea. Because sometimes absence really helps the creative process. So if you're working on something and you can't see the wood for the trees, step away for a bit, work on this one. And then if that one, then when you've got that to a certain point, go back to that one. Like I said at the beginning, I've gone back to tricks years and years and years gone by, and I've been able to look at it from a different direction, and I've been able to make it a lot better from my point of view. The other thing is, don't get emotionally attached to one particular trick. It doesn't matter how good the trick is. It could be your magnus opus. It could be the best trick of all time. It could be the one that you think is going to make you a superstar. Don't get too emotionally attached, because the amount of times that I've been working on a trick and I've had to bin it for whatever reason, one that I'm working on at the moment, it's just financially not possible. It works brilliantly. It's an amazing trick, but it would cost like $200 to bring it to market. It would cost people $200, and it's just too expensive. It's not a $200 trick, and there's no way to bring the costs down. I've shelved that for now. Unless I can find something where the costs are going to massively be reduced, there's no way financially I can bring that to market. It might be that you've got something that's come out, and then you find out, maybe when you're speaking to the experts, you found out that there's something similar to that, and you can't do a deal with the person that bought it out before you, in which case you're done. You know, you can't bring it out. If you're emotionally attached to that trick, it's going to kill you. So don't be emotionally attached to any trick. That's really, really important, because you never know when you're going to have to pull the plug on it. And you don't want to be in a situation where you're in a complete funk because you've had this amazing idea, which for one point or another, you can't bring to market. Make sure you don't get emotionally attached, and make sure you're constantly working on something new and something exciting. If there's particular parts of this process that you get really excited about, constantly be doing that with one of your routines that you're working on. So like I said, one of my favorite things is, the trial and error phase, and coming up with ideas and seeing if it works, and just kind of like being a mad scientist. I'm always doing that with various different things. I've got 4 or 5 things that I'm doing that with at the same time. And I'll be doing that one, I'll put that to one side, I'll be doing this one, and then I'll be doing this one. It's almost like juggling. You know, I'm having so much fun doing this, and that's what it should be. Being creative should be fun. Don't do this because you want to do it because of money. Don't do it because of fame. Don't do it because of fortune. Don't do it because of notoriety. Don't do it for any of those reasons. Do this because it's fun, because you enjoy doing it. It should be fun. And if it is fun, it's going to make the whole process just amazing, right? But don't do it to be the next greatest Greg Wilson or Jay Sankey. Do it because this is something that you enjoy doing. It should be like a calling to you. That is my creative process. So there you go, guys. That's exactly what I go through to get for a product from A through to Z. Do me a favor now. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. You want to see more videos like this? Like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below. Now, I'm going to be back again tomorrow with another video. So thank you once again for joining me on Magic TV. If you want to go check out the net tricks, please do so. Go to www.thenettricks.com. That's www.thenettricks.com. I'll be back again soon. Thanks very much for watching. My name's Craig from Magic TV.